What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video, and after a long break, if you missed my announcement, my post, however you want to phrase it, I've had a lot of technical issues with my computer. The screen ended up dying. The piece from Apple's on back order, not available till maybe mid-May. Looks like I'm going to end up having to buy a new computer, so it's been a long, complicated process, and it led to me not being able to release my tier video or tier rankings of each and every position group in this draft class, getting that out there, running through some of the what-if situations with this upcoming draft that I wanted to make. So I do apologize. Long hiatus for myself, and even today's video, no face cam. Made a couple of upgrades and purchases, so once I do have my main computer back and my editing software, etc., videos I think are going to look really, really good, and I'm going to create some awesome content. I'm excited to bring that your way, but I do apologize again for the delay and today not being my normal setup. Be on the lookout though. I will hopefully have first round draft pick grades, entire draft grades team by team for both those videos. So be on the lookout for that the rest of this week into the weekend. So hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. It's my final mock draft for 2022. This is my predictive, what I think could happen on Thursday night. So hopefully you all enjoy it. And if you do, hit that like button. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We're not done covering the NFL, especially once I get my laptop back. We're going to be firing on all cylinders and creating some awesome content that I'm excited to share with y'all. But, of course, most importantly, join me for a conversation down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team? What prospects do you think make great fits? Who do I have going too high? Who do I have fallen too far? Love some of your thoughts down in the comment section. Let's talk about this upcoming NFL draft. Without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm going to try to avoid long tangents so we can keep this video with a good pace. I think Hutchinson still should be the pick at number 1. I'm intrigued by Trevon Walker, and we'll kind of talk about this here with the Lions at 2. But especially in the 3-4 defense, his ability to maybe be a 3-tech, that 3-4 DN as opposed to an outside stand-up rusher, which I think he can do that as well potentially. That ability to move him inside and out is kind of intriguing, but this is a Jags team that needs wins, and Hutchinson feels like a safer bet than a Walker, honestly, by a long mile. But the upside might be obviously a little disparity in the favor of Walker there. But a Jags team that needs wins, I'd go with Hutchinson at 1. He is a stellar athlete, and he does bring star-level potential. It's not like you're just taking a good, high-floor player with no upside. I think Hutchinson's a nice balance of both, and he's coming off a dominant season, and a season coming off of an injury before that. So I think there's still something to tap into and get him to be an even better player. Plus, you listen to how people around the Michigan football program talk about Hutchinson as a leader. That is something else the Jags have got to be coveting, right? Somebody who can just step in that locker room, command that space, and put them on the right path, and kind of be an extension of the coaching staff, Doug Peterson and company. So I'm hoping Hutchinson's the pick there, but with all that said, I should say, Trevon Walker is going to be the pick at 2. It's kind of a tough spot here for the Lions. I'd be intrigued by Sauce Gardner being the pick here at 2, pairing him up with Jeff Okudah. But let's go with Trevon Walker, and I think the Lions are in a nice spot to be suited if Walker hits his upside. Great, he's an upgrade over Charles Harris and the Okwara brothers. But if he doesn't, and he just doesn't live up to the billing of what his athleticism says he can be, it's okay. You still have the Okwara brothers. You still have Charles Harris. You have players who can, in the meantime, avoid you picking number 2 overall again next season. So I think they're in a spot to be able to, feed and feel the success of what Walker could become. But also, if he doesn't hit that potential, be fine. You hate to waste the number 2 overall pick, but I think they're in a spot where they can benefit from the good, but also avoid some of the bad that could potentially come from, if Walker doesn't hit his full potential. So, I think there's other routes they could go. Kyle Hamilton's also intriguing here because they definitely need a safety. But, 2 feels kind of rich there. As much as I do love Kyle Hamilton, but where his buzz is at right now, 2 feels like it would be a huge surprise. So let's go Trevon Walker, and let's go bank on the upside of someone, to that athletic caliber. And then, similar conversation, Ikem Ekwonu. He may not be my offensive tackle 1. I'll kind of provide some of my tiers and position rankings we go out, so you guys can hold it against me in years to come. But Ikem Ekwonu, I think, makes a lot of sense, and you'll hear me talk about these a couple different players throughout this video, but these tackles that maybe profile a little bit as guards, especially considering they're not totally refined as pass protectors. It's an opportunity for a guy like Ikem Ekwonu and others to learn on the fly, right? You restructure the deal for Laremy Tunsil. Titus Howard looked pretty good when they moved him out to tackle. So maybe you already have your tackle situation, filled out. But if you take Ikem Ekwonu, you can allow himself to continue to grow as a pass protector and grow in that area and get better while getting on the field, getting playing time, and providing an impact for your offense and your team in and of itself. So play him at guard, allow him to get better as a pass protector, learn on the fly, and eventually maybe, Tunsil has to be moved and you need more assets. Or maybe Titus Howard really isn't your long-term right tackle, and Akim Aquano can fill either of those spots. So learn on the fly, good value. You're banking on the upside here too, and this has been called a down draft class, so why not go chase upside? And I'm always somebody who's a little more biased to going after potential home runs, so I don't really hate either one of these second or third overall picks. And then Kayvon Thibodeau, I have him coming off the board here at 4 to the Jets, and it really does feel like this is probably your top 4 in some order or another, but it feels like that's your top 4. And Thibodeau has this Nick Bosa type of potential in a Robert Saleh defense. The first step is electric for Thibodeau, getting off the line of scrimmage. He can get better as a pass rusher and becoming more refined. And, the effort certainly isn't always there, especially in the run game. But, it's the Pac-12, and, it's kind of one of these conferences that doesn't have the grit that maybe you associate with the SEC or something similar. And, I also think there's something to, Oregon didn't fully get the maximized potential of Justin Herbert or Penei Sewell. So maybe, with Thibodeau making the leap to the NFL and having new challenges to overcome, maybe that, entices him to always be giving 100%. And, maybe that's that final barrier. He just needs that extra challenge. Sometimes, I actually went to school for a little bit and originally planned on being a teacher, but sometimes you have students who just need more of a challenge to fully, connect with them and have them put forward the effort, and maybe that's something similar here with Thibodeau, and maybe once he gets to the NFL, he's locked in, ready to go, and hey, if he hits his potential, it's a Nick Bosa type of effect for that Jets defense, which you add that in the mix with Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Quinnen Williams and company, I mean, that is a scary front four, and it makes everything, in the back seven that much easier to, live off of maybe not prime talent in those groups, and we're actually not done addressing the defensive line for the Jets. More on that later. For the Giants, let's go with Evan Neal here. Plug and play right tackle. You can keep Thomas at left tackle. I think that's a really nice, situation for the Giants to have. And we're not done addressing offensive line. A little bit of a spoiler there for 7, but this feels like, and we'll see what happens with Kadarius Toney, or rumors that he might be on his way out. But say he stays, you look at the wide receiver room, that's a solid group, and then you add Evan Neal to the offensive line, you're feeling pretty good about that, and you get a good look at what Daniel Jones is going to be this upcoming season, which has got to be the focus for Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, and company in New York. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, this is kind of the first where the draft could break into 1,000 different directions. And I mean, granted, these first 5 picks kind of have that same effect, but really it feels like the draft kind of begins here with Carolina. And there's a lot of buzz and a lot of reason to think that Kenny Pickett's their guy. So that's where I'm going to go here. They have him, raise up the football to see, get this guy hold it. It seems like you only do that if you're only really, really interested in the guy. So, if they go Willis because they're going for the upside, I think that, is worthy of being number 6 here versus Pickett. You feel better if you're taking him, in the teens, 20s, maybe the second round. But I think Pickett's kind of gained this label as this pro-ready guy. Almost, if you're chasing pro-ready, then maybe Desmond Ridder should be the pick here. For those who maybe have placed bets that Ridder is the first quarterback off the board, you're feeling good about that idea. You're probably a little too late to the train if you're placing those bets now, but tangent aside, Pickett, I guess high floor, he kind of feels like a Sam Darnold in a lot of ways when I look at him. And part of the reason I'm not crazy about Kenny Pickett is just because why did it take so long to have that breakout season at Pittsburgh? And it feels like, you look at Sam Howell, True Jr. coming out in 2 years' time, he'll have those mechanical tweaks. Maybe he'll fix his footwork like we saw Kenny Pickett do in year 5 at Pittsburgh, and that's his step forward. We've already seen that for Kenny Pickett. So I feel like Pickett's going to be one of those guys where, sure, maybe pro-ready-ish, but how much more are you really getting down the line? I don't know if there's a whole lot more to tap into because Pickett's kind of already refined some of the technique, and the athletic ability is what it is. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just kind of somewhere there in the middle. So I'm not really crazy about this pick, obviously, but it seems like it's maybe the direction they want to go. If I'm Carolina, I think if Pickett is your guy at 6, I just assume move a 4 to get Baker Mayfield and see what he looks like with Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Christian McCaffrey, and then go draft a tackle here at 6. And depending on the value of Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe you can do something similar for him as opposed to Baker Mayfield, another member of the 2018 draft class. So tough spot for Carolina, but they put themselves into the spot. But let's just say Kenny Pickett is pick at 6, and that allows the Giants to get kind of interesting here at 7, and Pittsburgh may not be right here, but I think this trade is more than plausible. Giants move from 7, go back to 20, and get a future first. It allows them to say, hey, Daniel Jones probably isn't our guy, so let's go ahead and get an extra asset for next year's draft that allows us to move up and get a guy like a Bryce Young if we really like him. Or if there's a veteran that somehow becomes available and we feel like it's a great fit, we have 2 1s in next year's draft class. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Giants and for Pittsburgh. You don't often give up draft capital, but QB is a huge need. Last draft for Kevin Colbert, this is a chance for him to draft that Big Ben heir apparent. And, you sign Mitch Trubisky, which I don't think anybody wants to see as the long-term option in Pittsburgh. But this is a spot where Trubisky could be your interim starter before Wills eventually takes over. And, even if Wills does play, you see Jalen Hurts raise the floor of a Philadelphia offense. What does a, backfield with Malik Willis and Najee Harris look like? I'm kind of intrigued by what that offense under Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator kind of comes together and what its identity is. So, intrigued by what that might be. I also do want to shout and throw out this idea. I think Pittsburgh and Carolina, it's not a trade, combination I've seen anywhere, but I think it makes a ton of sense. Like if Pittsburgh's saying we don't want to give up a future first, but we're willing to give up a 2 and a 3, maybe, some draft capital in 2023, a day 2 pick there, a day 3 pick there. And Carolina saying we want Kenny Pickett, we don't want to go chase Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo. This kind of makes sense a lot of ways in my eyes because, Pittsburgh moves up to 6, gets Malik Willis, great. And then for Carolina, you're moving back to 20, you get Kenny Pickett. You feel better about taking him at 20 versus 6 anyways. Plus, you get that day 2 capital from Pittsburgh where you could dress tackle. You can go get that Hassan Reddick replacement. So I think it's one that I haven't seen, but Pittsburgh-Carolina trade discussions I think should be in the mix. But in this video, I decided to do Pittsburgh and the Giants. And we'll come back to the New York Football Giants later on in this draft. Moving on to the Falcons, though, let's go with Jameson Williams. They bring in Auden Tate, this 6'4", big body possession type, which I'm really enamored to see what he looks like as, a starting wide receiver because he's always been one of these guys that's like, wow, he's your wide receiver 4. What a luxury in Cincinnati. Pair him with Jameson Williams, this ultimate speed threat, and then you have Kyle Pitts as this, 4-4 speed tight end wide receiver combos, the ultimate queen on the chessboard type, and all of a sudden you look at that pass catching group for Atlanta plus Cordero Patterson, of course, and you're like, okay, it's not maybe elite, but it's not as bad as it once was during this offseason. So add Williams into the mix, and keep in mind, Henry Ruggs was the first wide receiver in that draft class too. It was at 2019, ahead of a Jerry Jeudy, ahead of a CeeDee Lamb. Sometimes speed is the ultimate trump card, and I think that might be the case on Thursday with Jameson Williams. On to the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go with Sauce Gardner here. There's not a whole lot of routes I wouldn't like for Seattle here. If they went Malik Willis, let's say he's on the board here. Okay, you're taking a swing of the bat, trying to find that potential QB of the future. All right, and he kind of fits that run-first ideology with Pete Carroll. If they go Charles Cross here, I think that's great value at 9. Cross is my offensive tackle 1, so I'd love that value for the Seahawks. If they go edge rusher, like if Thibodeau falls or Walker, I'd love them going to chase the upside of one of those two guys at the edge position. But here, Sauce Gardner feels like he checks every box. He's a great scheme fit. He's a day 1 upgrade at that position. And he has the potential to be a lockdown CB1 of the future for this team. So hits every note. I love Sauce Gardner there at 9. He might go earlier. And, talking about that trade with the Giants, that trade doesn't make sense if they're moving on from James Bradberry. So there is a little bit of a caveat. So this trade does not happen if Bradberry is moved, because then at that point you're taking Sauce Gardner if you're the Giants and getting that Bradberry replacement there. But we'll kind of come back to that here in a moment, why I think they still might be able to get away with keeping Bradberry last year of his deal and moving back to 20. But moving on to the Jets, let's go Garrett Wilson here. I thought about London, but I decided they're in on Tyreek Hill. And that's not, to say that they're looking for speed. Jameson Williams would be the pick if he's here or anything like that. But because they're also looking at Deebo Samuel and, rumored to be linked to A.J. Brown. So they're also looking for physical, yak types as well. So I think they're just looking for a number 1. And maybe they're just saying, Garrett Wilson has that downfield speed, not nearly the same level as Tyreek Hill, but 4.38, the dude can get open at all 3 levels. He becomes a weapon in the yak game. So maybe Wilson's that combination of being the yards after the catch guy, but also having that downfield speed. That said, if they're really interested in a Deebo, or if they're really interested in a yak guy like A.J. Brown, or both those guys are yak guys, maybe Drake London does make sense as this bully ball, big, physical, tough guy that you can throw bubbles to, and it's like, all right, good luck, corners, tackling someone like a Drake London. that could certainly be in play here. But I decided to go Wilson, natural separator, wins at all three levels, can help in the yak department, but also be that downfield threat that they, might have been interested in acquiring with Tyreek Hill. So I kind of feel like it's a nice merge between what they're looking for. Moving on to the Washington Commanders, Kyle Hamilton continues to be my favorite pick here. Just a perfect add to that defense, and it feels like the last missing piece, and feels like, this team could get better at corner, but adding a Kyle Hamilton kind of makes up for some of the potential downfall for where they might be, a little weak at corner maybe. And, linebacking position could get better, but having an elite deep safety, but also a guy who can make an impact in the box kind of helps that group as well. So Kyle Hamilton kind of feels like that missing piece for a Washington defense that still has sky-high potential. And, before last regular season, I pegged the Washington defense as the number one defense in the NFL, and maybe if you add Hamilton, they'll get to live up to that billing. Minnesota Vikings, Derek Stingley Jr., this would be a slam dunk, especially after his pro day. 12 feels like about as far. 12 or 13 here. I really don't think he'll get past Houston. But, man, this guy has superstar potential, kind of like what we talked about with Walker and Ikem Ekwonu. Those guys have potential to be, a top 3, top 5 player at their position. And, in a draft class where it's perceived to be a little weak, a little thin on top-tier talent, sometimes going and chasing that potential superstar is that much more intriguing. And, Stingley feels like a stellar add to a team that needs cornerback. 2 LSU guys on the outside with Pat Pete coming back. Feels like a nice mentor spot for Stingley to learn from Pat Pete, a long-time NFL corner who had a lot of success. So makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels, all that to say. So love that pick there at 12 for Minnesota. And let's go on to Houston. Kind of similar to what I talked about with Ikem Ekwonu. Just go draft, good football players. And Jordan Davis, minimum, really awesome run stopper and a one-of-one type of dude, given his size and athletic ability and how well he can move. Feels like a potential Nick Caserio type of guy as well. Obviously, this is kind of the first draft. We're going to see them be active really early on. So we'll see. But this could be, Caserio with that New England background, that Vince Wilfork type. And, Jordan Davis has been comped by a lot of people as this, John Henderson recreation. And, Davis even talked about it himself. And I think that's a worthy add into this Lovie Smith defense, right? They need somebody to plug up the middle and kind of make the life of the linebackers and company a little easier. So this team needs a lot of help at a lot of different positions. So as much as you should be focusing on position value and best player available, I think maybe you lean towards best player available and say, hey, Ikem Ekwonu at his best is a potential superstar left tackle. Jordan Davis at his best is something we haven't seen before. So let's make them be the picks at 3 and 13. And, when you buy into that logic, if that's how you look at these picks, I think it makes some good sense. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens. Jermaine Johnson's a really interesting player here. The Ravens kind of already shown their cards, right, when they tried to sign Zadarius Smith, and ultimately that kind of falls through after a couple of attempts. But Jermaine Johnson, I feel like that's a really nice compliment, opposite of Odafe Oweh. So really like that. Plus, like I said, the Ravens have already shown that they're looking to add one more edge. So Jermaine Johnson, he kind of fluctuates. I know there's people who have him going as high as 5 to a team like the Giants. I'm not quite ready to go that far, but I do like him. He was right around with 20-something here on this PFF, big board. I might like him a little bit more than that. Production wasn't great. Had to transfer from Georgia to go to Florida State. Also had, his off-the-field issues. That's why he was on First Chance U, lol. But Last Chance U, opportunity for him to get back to the D1 level and, give him a ton of credit. Had obstacles put in front of him, and he overcame them, right? Went from being a guy who was playing at the JUCO level to get back to the D1 level, does that, has success at Florida State, balls out at the Senior Bowl, and, because of that, I think he's worthy of going in the first half of the first round. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think these next 2 picks would be dream scenarios for those 2 teams, but that's kind of how the board broke. Drake London feels like the big body, massive catch radius target that this offense is missing. And, if London falls into the laps of the Eagles, I think they sprint the card in and, pair him up with Devontae Smith. You move Jalen Reagor into this speedy slot downfield option. Maybe, going into year 3, making the role as simple as that for Reagor allows you to get something out of him as opposed to him being a complete bust, which I think should be a focus for Philadelphia. Validate that pick as much as you can from a couple years back. But London, Smith, as your outside guys. I love that. And of course, there's some flexibility there, right? Maybe you move him out to the outside. And maybe there's a matchup where London's getting a pick on a small nickel cornerback. You want to move him to the slot, take advantage of that. Or Devonta Smith is cooking up against the slot corner with his route running. You want to put him there. I think you have some flexibility inside now with those guys. And then moving on to the Saints, Charles Cross, again, my OT1. If this happens, New Orleans fans are rejoicing. It's Mardi Gras 2.0, right? So, this is your perfect situation to replace Teron Armstead. I think he's a ready to go day one type of guy. I don't think that you have to worry about the Mike Leach system at Mississippi State. I really think it's different for Cross because I think he is a really good run blocker, and you get to see him get down the field and showcase some of his strength there. But he's just so fluid laterally and specifically mirroring and pass protection. I just think you really can't do much better with how important pass protection is and how much the NFL is becoming more and more of a passing league. How could Cross not be valuable? And if he falls to 16, it's kind of a travesty because he should go a lot higher. But, perfect situation for New Orleans. Next up, got another tackle coming off the board here for the Chargers. Thought about Trevor Penning, but to do something a little different, let's go Bernhard Ryman. And this kind of comes down to the style of tackle, right? Penning, I think you associate with this mean mentality, going to be great in the run game, needs to get better as a pass protector. And he's kind of making 2 steps up from the FCS level up to the NFL level. Bernhard Ryman's obviously coming from a non-Power 5 school, but his strength in pass protection I think is a little more intriguing for what the Chargers are trying to do. And you can play this guy at right tackle, plus he's a little older, so maybe you have some perceived NFL readiness when it comes to his body and physical maturity. That's intriguing as well to put in the mix. But if Ryman is your right tackle opposite of Rashawn Slater, who you took in the first round last year, feel really good about that. Still need to find a right guard to plug away and finish that offensive line. But after so much effort was put into repairing the offensive line last year, it feels like it'd be a shame if this team didn't see it all the way through and get a right tackle here in the first round. I love wide receiver, wouldn't knock it at all. But then you have 2 holes there on the right side of the offensive line, which they put so much energy to not have Justin Herbert behind a terrible offensive line, so might as well see the job through in my eyes. Next up, back to the Eagles, and another pick where, if the Eagles came out of this draft with Drake London and Trent McDuffie, shout out Philadelphia. And this is all while they also made a deal with New Orleans, who's back on the clock, and moved one of their first this year into a first next year. So, this would be a stellar cycle for the Eagles in my eyes. And for McDuffie being the pick in specific, I know the size and the length concerns are there, but in that, very soft zone focused defense, I think him and Darius Slay are more than fine as your outside boundary corners. Avonte Maddox has proven to be a solid nickel. I think safety is still something to address, and we'll get to that later on in this draft. But, if you were to come away with 2 skilled perimeter players in London and McDuffie, I'm feeling really good about the Eagles' prospects to be, I don't want to say super scary because it's still Jalen Hurts, and as much as I am, a bigger proponent of his than others, it's still Jalen Hurts, so, we'll see. But the NFC is open, so, anything's possible there. Back to the Saints. I'm not letting Chris Olave get past this pick. This would be a slam dunk. And you look at, as much as I'm gushing over the Eagles, London and McDuffie pairing, Cross and Olave might be as good or better. Exactly what this team needs. Arguably BPA at both spots. You really can't find yourself in a better situation. Olave paired up with Michael Thomas, 2 Ohio State guys, but also winning in completely different ways. Marcus Callaway moves into that slot wide receiver role. You're giving Jameis Winston a shot to thrive and be a potential number 1 overall caliber quarterback, right? That's what he was, a little more than half a decade back. Try to give him an ecosystem around him where you can tap in that potential. And I think he looked pretty good last year before the injury. So if he can stay healthy, this is an intriguing year we would get into with New Orleans and get to see what Jameis becomes. So now we get back to the Giants. This obviously after the Pittsburgh Steelers trade. And I think this is, if Tyler Linderbaum, this is why I think this trade makes so much sense for the Giants. And plus, talking about the James Bradbury thing, you don't make the trade from 7 to 20 if you're going to take a corner as James Bradbury replacement. You just stick and pick at 7 and you get Sauce Gardner to be your Bradbury replacement. But I think you move from 7 to 20. Obviously, if you look at the effective cap, the Giants are still negative, but moving from 7 to 20 gives you a huge savings in that department. So maybe by making that trade, you are freeing up enough space to be able to keep James Bradbury in the building. And then now you look at this offensive line with Linderbaum at center. You move John Feliciano over to left guard, and you got Mark Lewinsky at right guard. Those are your 2 interior offensive linemen adds, plus Linderbaum here at 20. Neal, who you took at 5 at right tackle, and Andrew Thomas, an emerging left tackle. I'm feeling great about that offensive line. Now, of course, the caveat is James Bradbury, and if they're going to keep him around. But I think if you move from 7 to 20, you might free up just enough effective cap, be able to do just that. Let him play out the last year of his deal, and then say, hey, cornerback's going to be a need next year. But for right now, I think you're in a really solid spot. Keep the defense competitive. Finish the offensive line, which was a focus for the Bills when Joan Shane and Bill Bean were Brandon Bean, were first hired in Buffalo. So I think you might see something similar here, and I think that's why the trade from 7 to 20 makes a lot of sense. And then you're talking about Linderbaum. If he's taken at 7, a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, it's really rich for a center. At 20, there still might be people saying that's a little early, but you're going to look at it and say, but they got assets out of it. They got a future first plus Linderbaum, and he's a stellar scheme fit, and obviously a huge position of need. So big fan of that move for the Giants. If you are a Giants fan, let me know what you think about that move down below in the comment section. I'd love to have your thoughts. On to the New England Patriots, and as much as I think Devin Lloyd makes some sense here, they have players you can get by with, right? Like a Mack Wilson, Jawan Bentley's back. They have players they have been able to live with. Right now it's Malcolm Butler and Jalen Mills on the outside. Yeah, that's not going to fly. I think Andrew Booth Jr. is a stellar fit, whether they want to be a man-heavy team like they have been through the last couple of decades under Bill Belichick, or if they want to move to a zone focus. I think Booth Jr. fits no matter what they want to do. And I'm sorry, the cornerback position is in a more dire state in my eyes than the linebacker group, and also it's a more important position, right? So I also think there's something too, right? Like linebacker, you're not replacing a superstar. At cornerback, the Patriots are trying to replace a J.C. Jackson. So that hole's going to feel that much more enormous with that context in your mind. Like, man, remember when they didn't pay J.C. Jackson? Versus linebacker when it's like, okay, this has just been a problem group for a little bit and they need to, invest a little bit there. So part of that kind of bakes into my mindset here. But I'm going to go with Booth Jr. here at 21. First of 2 picks for the Green Bay Packers. I love Zion Johnson here. And Zion Johnson kind of feels like he could be this year's Elton Jenkins in a lot of way. Coming from, Power 5 school, but not one of those headline programs in those conferences, and this guard tackle flexibility kind of play anywhere. I think in this situation, you're playing Zion Johnson at left guard, ideally, moving Elton Jenkins over to right tackle, maximizing his value, and then David Bakhtiari at left. But then you also have a ton of potential leeway if Bakhtiari, God forbid, does go down. You can move Jenkins over to left tackle, Johnson over to right tackle, or maybe it's just Johnson moving over to left, keeping Jenkins at right, whatever the case may be. Whatever you want to do. You have those potential options in front of you, and I love offensive line versatility. It's something I take, a lot of onus in, and it's something that I weigh heavily into my evaluation process. So I think Zion Johnson would be a slam dunk here, and plus, Green Bay's kind of already shown something similar with taking an Elton Jenkins, somebody who could play a lot of different spots. So Zion Johnson might check a box there for Green Bay. To the Arizona Cardinals, really good value here with George Karlaftis. They need an edge rusher, got to replace Chandler Jones. This is a tough spot for the Cardinals. If Zion Johnson's here, I think they would really like that situation as a potential long-term Rodney Hudson replacement, but also plug and play starting left guard for the time being. They could get better at corner, so Kyrie Elam could certainly be in play here. A lot of holes to fill, and maybe it's a trade down spot because of that for Arizona. But here, let's stick and pick. Let's go with Karlaftis. I think that's a really nice add to that defense. At 24, I think Dallas fans are not going to like this with me, but Tyler Smith feels like their guy. They want to add offensive line. Jerry Jones has been very public about that. And Smith, like Ikem Ekwonu, can learn on the fly. Tyler Smith, I think, is a plug-and-play left guard. I think if you add him, plus have Zeke Elliott behind him, he kind of fits that identity of, like, we're just going to pound opposing defenses in the face. We're just going to run it down their throat, whatever. He fits that identity. That tough guy persona that Dallas kind of wants to have. But then long term, Tyler Smith is your Tyron Smith replacement. It almost makes that perfect to T. Smith replacing T. Smith. And then in the event of an injury to Tyron Smith, I think Tyler Smith could potentially move out to play left tackle. So it feels like the Cowboys are really committed to do Tyron Steele over at right tackle. We'll see how that plays out as he's replacing Lyle Collins, who's pretty damn good in my eyes. But Tyler Smith feels like a nice balance there for Dallas, where he's going to be an upgrade over left guard, and he's a potential replacement for Tyron Smith, because you got to be thinking about the future here. In 3 years, Tyron Smith might not be your left tackle. Tyler Smith might be able to fill that void down the line. Then we get to the Buffalo Bills, and I thought about Breece Hall here. I thought about going corner, maybe Kyrie Elam. I think this is a really interesting spot for a guy like Treylon Burks to go. A lot of the criticism for Burks is, he lived a lot out of the slot for Arkansas, and I think part of that is because of, the quarterbacks throwing him the ball. I think that's something that should be a part, something accounted for. But here, he's also a guy 6 foot, 4-ish, big body, something that Buffalo doesn't necessarily have. Diggs is well built, 6'1", has NFL wide receiver size, but Burks gives you that little bit more out of it. And, you play him in the slot. He's your Cole Beasley replacement. And the other part of it is, as much as I did think about Breece Hall here, this is a very analytically driven franchise, and I just have a hard time thinking they're going to be the team to take that first round running back. So because of that, Burks kind of fits a little bit more of that mold, high position value with wide receiver. And, Burks still feels like a first round talent. And if it's not here, maybe 26 to the Titans, maybe Tampa's intrigued, maybe Green Bay at 29, Kansas City at 29 or 30. There's plenty of other landing spots, 32, 34 to Detroit, but maybe the second round, he could fall that far. I know Burks is really tough to peg where he might land, but I think at 25, the Bills putting so much emphasis in this arms race, and they're a huge catalyst to why the AFC is just stockpiling talent. Why not add one more wide receiver, right? And if Burks is comfortable playing out of the slot, he gives you somebody who's a plug-and-play replacement for Beasley, but also has a bigger size and can be an end-around gadgety type. And you think about, some of the hits that Josh Allen takes, maybe Burks is one way, and that's part of why I was thinking about Breece Hall here, ways to take hits away from Josh Allen and put it in the hands or put it on the body of someone else. So maybe it's using Burks as, a yak guy, an extension of the run game, end arounds, jets, whatever the case, whatever you want to draw up. Maybe that's one way where he becomes the guy running into the end zone or taking hits in goal-to-go spots, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's Burks or maybe it's a Breece Hall taking those hits away from Josh Allen. But here I really kind of like the idea. Treylon Burks, that's why I just rambled on for an hour, it felt like. But next up, Tennessee Titans. I don't think that Trevor Penning will still be here, but another tackle that gets to learn on the fly, right? For Penning, it's a chance for plug-and-play left guard. Awesome. And this feels like a Mike Vrabel guy where this guy is mean, gonna make a huge splash in the run game. Awesome. And I'm sure Derrick Henry would love to run behind Trevor Penning. But then also, a couple years down the line, we'll see what happens with the tackle position. If Dylan Radunz works out on the right side, what they have long term in Taylor Lewan. Penning is another potential replacement to either one of those two guys in a handful of years. So really like this landing spot for Penning, and it's also a really good fit in Tennessee. And then really solid value here, Devontae Wyatt. This is one I feel like I made 1,000 times this offseason. Just a perfect Ndamukong Suh replacement. 3-tech, and you pair him next to Vita Vea. Some people are going to worry, why did it take so long for Wyatt to break out? He's 24 years old. Did it take a Jordan Davis to be next to him for him to play at a high level like he did at Georgia? Well, if that's the case, all right, we'll pair him next to the best nose tackle in football in Vita Vea, and, he should be pretty good. So, if that's the situation and that's the, circumstances that Wyatt needs to thrive, well, Tampa Bay provides that for him. So, really love that fit for both the player and the team. Then the Green Bay Packers for a second time. Let's go George Pickens here. I think he fits a lot of their criteria. High upside. He has the size they covet. He's willing to block in the run game. Makes a lot of sense there. So I think Pickens is the Green Bay wide receiver to watch there in the first round. As much as that, people would love Chris Olave to be the pick for Green Bay, maybe at 22. And maybe a Sky Moore is interesting there at 28. I think Pickens is a little bit more the Green Bay style of wide receiver. And then, speaking of Sky Moore, let's make him the pick here at 29. And a guy who can win at all three levels. And then you look at that wide receiver room in Kansas City. Who wins in the intermediate? Well, that's Travis Kelce. That's Juju Smith-Schuster. Who wins down the field? Well, that would be Sky Moore and MVS. And then, those guys who win in the yak department. Kelsey's certainly an awesome player in that regard at the tight end position. You have Mecole Hardman, who's become more valuable almost at the line of scrimmage than he is as a true downfield deep threat. And then Sky Moore also an impact in the yak game. So you kind of have multiple people who can win at multiple layers, and maybe that's the diversity and the versatility that this Kansas City offense needs, because last year they have the big trio with Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill, but defenses still were able to find stops. So maybe if they have multiple guys who win in multiple areas, that's how you combat that. So it's an intriguing fit there in my eyes. And then sticking with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think just like Tyler Smith, Arnold Ebiketie has had his name get hot at the right time, and it feels like both those guys are going to go in the first round now. And Ebiketie, I think, is a really nice add to this Kansas City defense, somebody who can play opposite of Frank Clark, but spoiler alert, I'm not done adding to the edge group. I think this Kansas City team should throw multiple darts and try to find legitimate replacements and upgrades to that position. Because right now it's just Ebiketie and Frank Clark. I think they can do better than Frank Clark. And honestly, I don't know why they're keeping him around. Not to be totally, blasphemous and try to tear down the man's name, but I'm kind of questioning why he's still around. But anyways, I digress. Let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. Kenyon Green, you play Ted Karras at center. Kenyon Green becomes your left guard. That offensive line's done, right? You'd be looking at Jonah Williams, Kenyon Green, Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, and Lyle Collins. I mean, boom. You add 3 starters. You're feeling great about where that team's at. Add 4 starters for that point, and then Jonah Williams already there at left tackle. You feel really good about that if you're a Bengals fan, and specifically if you're Joe Burrow, right? But even the wide receivers, right? The longer that Burrow has to throw it, further down the field you can get, more time you have to separate. So I think it helps out the group of Higgins and Boyd and Jamar Chase, of course. And then the last pick of the first round. This is going to be this. I don't know how people are going to receive this one, but I'm going to go Dax Hill. And part of it is I think Aaron Glenn knows safety is a huge need. And, you look at picking at 2, Kyle Hamilton, you don't love the value there, but Dax Hill, 32, it's like, okay, that makes more sense. That value adds up a little better. And I do want to give an honorable mention to Lewis Cine. I think Cine would be a stellar ad if they're looking for a true deep free safety who also has the ability to play downhill and be a force in the box. But Dax Hill could be Aaron Glenn, who, keep in mind, former defensive backs coach in New Orleans, his new Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, this nickel corner box safety type of mold, and then you can move Tracy Walker as your true deep free safety, where I think maybe he's, if you put him specifically in that role, you'll get his best play. So Hill can be your box safety / nickel corner this team doesn't really have after moving on from Justin Coleman, an offseason back. So I think Dax Hill makes a whole lot of sense here. And if you're going to go safety, even though Hill's kind of this corner safety hybrid, it makes sense for Detroit to do it at 32, and it matches up with the value a little better than maybe Kyle Hamilton at 2, at least in most people's eyes. On to the second round, though, and we're going to start off with a couple linebackers. And part of it is tough when you make these mock drafts. You look at Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean. I'd have them as probably first-round players and as my Tier 1 linebacking duo. But I think a conversation that's going to be had for teams is like, okay, well, we go Devin Lloyd in round 1, and we'll kind of talk about this with New England, and I don't want to spoil that pick, but I'm going to have them go linebacker at midway in the second round. I'm trying to pick 54. And, the conversation is going to be, how much do you gain versus lose with Lloyd at 21 or a different linebacker at 54? And because of that, maybe you'll see Lloyd and Dean push down the board. And now in this situation, they're available in the second round. And we're going to see them be the first 2 picks of the second round because now that's kind of off the table. And Devin Lloyd, awesome ad. You pair him up with Foyesade Oluokun. That's a nice linebacker duo. People have been pointing out to Lloyd's pass rush ability off the edge. And, if Lloyd is this kind of headhunter, all over the field type of guy, Foyesade Oluokun's your coverage dude, that's a nice pairing there, and you're starting to see that be the mold for your inside linebacker duo in a 3-4 scheme. And then back to the Lions, you've seen Nakobe Dean a handful of times be the pick at 32, so I think it makes a ton of sense there at 34, and it's a position where they can get better. We'll see, if this is truly an area of their need, because I think they do like Sean Dion Hamilton. I think they do like Alex Anzalone, who they brought back, and they drafted Derek Barnes from Purdue last year. So I don't know if they see linebacker as a true need, but here in this spot, Nakobe Dean's just a better Derek Barnes. So I don't know why you wouldn't just jump on that, and it's an awesome value there at 34. And then back to the Jets. Let's go with Travis Jones. This is your new nose tackle of the future. Pair him up with, versatile John Franklin Myers and specifically Quinnen Williams. Let Quinnen Williams focus on pass rush. Let Travis Jones be the run-stopping guy there in the middle. He's probably only an early downs guy. He does have some pass rush upside. He has a good get-off, and he has a lot of play strength. So I'd be interested to see what he could develop as a pass rusher. But, here for the Jets, you add Kayvon Thibodeau, you add Travis Jones. You're just adding potential star level guys, and for Thibodeau's sake, superstar if he hits full potential, guys on that defensive line, which is a focus for not only the front office but also Robert Saleh. At 36, I think this is a really interesting spot for Boye Mafe to go. This is the Giants team that a lot of people have been clamoring that they need an edge, and they could go one at 5 or 7 and get a Thibodeau. They could get a Jermaine Johnson, maybe Trevon Walker at 7 if they really like that, if he's available at that point. But in this situation, we fixed the offensive line, and now, top of the second round, now you can go get someone like a Boye Mafe and pair him up with Azeez Ojulari, and I think that's a really nice duo, and it kind of opens up this opportunity where you look at the top of the second, it's kind of been this hotbed for grabbing wide receivers, and maybe the top of the second's also something similar for edge rushers, right? So We'll see. Time will tell that story, but I think Mafe, Azeez Ojulari, that's a nice pairing for the future for the G-men. And then for the Houston Texans, I think Kyler Elam actually makes a whole lot of sense here. I think Elam should be a first-round pick, and I think he makes sense at 21 to New England. I think he makes sense at 23 to Arizona. He would work at 31 to Cincy. But here, you look at Nick Caserio and, the guys that New England has typically liked. Kyler Elam, there's a reason I think he makes sense at 21, right? Because he kind of fits that traditional Bill Belichick guy. And maybe Caserio has those similar tastes in corners, and if he does, Kyler Elam at 37. Awesome value, position in need, and high position value. Checks all the boxes there in my eyes. Back to the Jets. I'm going to go Quay Walker here. He's a really tough guy to figure out where exactly he'll go. But for Robert Saleh, who, obviously coming from San Francisco, had his Fred Warner. Quay Walker is this, he looks like an NFL linebacker, 240 pounds, has the side, checks that box. Uber athletic, moves as fluid and as smooth as it gets, especially at that position. He just needs to learn how to play the position. And that's where you just had to lean on someone like a Robert Saleh being a defensive mastermind and trying to develop a guy like Quay Walker. But here at 38, I think it's worth the risk, right? I think at this point, you've already picked 3 times. Go chase some upside, and if Quay Walker works out and he's coached up properly, I mean, this dude easily could be a top 32 player in this draft class, and we'll look at even him at 38 as a stellar value. So there's some risk-reward here, but as your 4th pick of the draft, I think you roll the dice here if you have the Jets. Then for the Chicago Bears, I think it's a interesting spot for wide receiver. Jalen Tolbert certainly in play, but let's go Christian Watson. I think Jahan Dotson also honorable mention here. But I could see Chicago saying, well, we lost a lot of size with Allen Robinson. Let's go get a guy who something similar. Watson a little bit bigger at 6'4", 6'5"-ish, and a little faster than Allen Robinson. He kind of feels like the souped-up 2022 version of Allen Robinson in a lot of ways. But somebody who needs to get better as a pass catcher and as a route runner in and of itself. The hands aren't always there. It's kind of inconsistent. The route running not always there. Certainly not his strength. But you can't deny the size and speed element to what Watson could be, right? So even if it's just as a vertical wide receiver, you teach him a handful of routes and make him become, this, baby DK Metcalf, there's value in that. And then you pair him up with Darnell Mooney, give him, a quarterback like Justin Fields, who has a cannon for an arm and a lot of downfield accuracy. It's a marriage that I think could work out. A lot of work to be done, but I think the Chicago team understands their timetable, so why not take a project wide receiver here at 39? On to a pair of picks for the Seattle Seahawks. I think Des Ridder would be a stellar pick here at 40. I think that's sound process. He may well go in the first round. Honestly, right now, I think Ridder is a first-round quarterback. I just didn't love a fit for him in the first round, other than maybe if instead of Kenny Pickett being the pick at 6, it's Malik Willis going 6 to Carolina. I could see Pittsburgh staying pat at 20 and saying, let's just grab who we like the most, and maybe that's Des Ridder. Who knows? But I think if Ridder falls to the second round, he's available there at 40. I think he makes a lot of sense for what Pete Carroll wants to do. Similar play style to that of Russell Wilson. And just, you're not forcing the issue there. You got a nice player at 9. You're not trying to have this rebuild done in a season or one off season. You're being meticulous and you're going through your process soundly. So I like Ridder here at 40. And then at pick number 41, let's go Abraham Lucas. And in this situation, I think they got really solid value with Stone Forsythe last year in the 6th round. I really don't know why he fell that far, but this could be a spot here where Lucas is still a bit of a project and maybe not super solid day one, but Lucas gets to stay in the state of Washington. You play him at right tackle. Forsythe's your left tackle of the future. They still might bring back a Brandon Shell or Dwayne Brown. We'll see. Both unsigned as of my knowledge at this point, but I think that's a nice tackle duo of the future. Still some work to be done there, but I think those two could be the starting tackles of the future for Seattle. And then for the Indianapolis Colts, I think Jahan Dotson makes an absolute ton of sense as pretty much a T.Y. Hilton replacement. Has that downfield speed, crisp route runner, and a nice complement opposite of Michael Pittman Jr. Matt Ryan, he's going to need weapons to throw to. So wide receiver is a huge need. It has been for a while, so it's about time Indianapolis pour some full resources into it, not just trying to bring back an aging T.Y. and mid-round pick here. Dotson's a legitimate wide receiver, could go in the first round, and you're just getting him in a good spot here at 42. Then for the Atlanta Falcons, again, sound process. If Sam Howell falls to your lap in the second round, take advantage of it, right? There's a lot of need on this team, but also right now their backup quarterback's Felipe Franks. So I think this is a team that wants to add a quarterback. So now you're adding a dude with an absolute howitzer for an arm, and Sam Howell. You already took Jameson Williams at 8. That's a potential, pairing for the future that I'm really intrigued to see get on the field. But Howell doesn't have to get forced to rush out there. He can play behind Marcus Mariota, and those two even have some similarities in their skill set, being able to move the pocket and be mobile quarterbacks. But also, I think Howell brings a little bit more in regards to arm strength, and obviously he has that long-term potential that Mariota just doesn't have anymore as someone who's been in the league for a handful of years. So I think it makes a lot of sense for where the Falcons are right now, but also, again, the process should just sound. You take them at 43, and I won't scoff at it whatsoever. And then this is a really interesting pick here for the Cleveland Browns. I'd love to go wide receiver. You could go Jalen Tolbert, maybe John Mechie III. I don't hate it, but in this spot, despite them being rumored, and it feels more than likely that they'll bring back Jadeveon Clowney, David Ojabo is a really spicy draft and stash for this team, right? So let's say they do bring back Jadeveon Clowney. All the more reason not to rush back David Ojabo. But if you bring back Clowney, it's probably not anything long-term. He seems like a guy who's willing to go offseason by offseason and make his money. And, good on him. He's cashing out because of it. But that makes it so Ojabo is that heir apparent too, right? So you have Clowney take over, and then maybe when you're getting the playoffs, Ojabo is that DPR, third down pass rusher, and then you get to next season, you don't need to re-sign Jadeveon Clowney, and the Deshaun Watson money is going to kick in next year. You're going to have to try to find ways to come up with some savings. So instead of paying a Jadeveon Clowney, let's say $13 million a year, you have David Ojabo in his rookie contract, and you're finding corners to cut there. So this is a really interesting draft and stash spot for a guy who, pre-injury, it feels like a lock for the first round. So really interesting spot. Don't know if it'll totally happen because Ojabo could definitely go before this. And I don't even know if the Browns would go here. If there's a wide receiver on the board, I think that might be their focus. But with the way the boards played out, I think this is a really perfect situation for both the player and the team. Sticking in the AFC North, let's go to the Baltimore Ravens. Let's go Chad Muma here. He sifts through traffic and makes such a big impact in the run game, right? He's able to evade blocks and find ball carriers really well. His vision there is really something really special and something that not a whole lot of other guys in this draft class have. Pair him up with Patrick Queen. I think it makes a lot of sense. Different skill sets that play well off of one another. And I think it just get better, right? Like Josh Barnes is probably not their long-term other inside linebacker. I'm not even sure Patrick Queen is a long-term starter for this team, given he has had some disappointing moments and ultimately hasn't lived up to first round billing when the Ravens took him a handful of years ago. So I think Move makes some sense. You take him in the second round, good value. I think you're going to see a lot of linebackers, a lot of safeties in the second round. On to pick 46, Minnesota. This is a tough one because I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, there's no quarterbacks here to try to groom. You could go back to the well with corner. Don't hate that. Garrett Bradbury hasn't been stellar, but he's been talked up by the coaches, and really he's kind of the lone weak spot in my eyes on that offensive line, especially if you like Wyatt Davis at right guard, which I do. I think the offensive line's fine, so I'm just going to go back to the edge rushing position. I think linebacker, as it was on the screen for a moment there, could be in play, right? Eric Kendricks is getting older. It's a one-year deal for Jordan Hicks. Probably not somebody that they're going to want to keep bringing back. So linebacker is certainly an option here. Maybe they like a Muma or someone similar. But let's just go back to the well with edge. Not back to the well. That wasn't the first pick. But let's go Drake Jackson here. You have Zadarius Smith, someone who was banged up last year. You have Danielle Hunter, who been injured each of the last 2 years. So Jackson, one, if those other two guys are healthy, is an awesome third pass rusher. And if you're really creative, maybe you can move some of the other two guys around. Maybe Zadarius Smith can play a little bit more on the inside and you get Jackson on the field as well. But in reality, one of those two guys, maybe even both of them, are going to battle injuries at some point next season. So Jackson could be your stopgap and fill-in option there at that spot. So because of that, I think it's a worthy swing of the bat. And dude, when you just talk about get off and pinning your ears back, getting the quarterback, Jackson is one of the best pass rushers in this class. And I think at 46, it's good value there for Minnesota. So this is an insurance policy, a potential start of the future if things don't work out with Danielle Hunter as well, another element to this. So I like it a lot. And they just got to add resources. And plus, they could go linebacker here. Don't love where the board's at with corner. Don't love where it's at with quarterback. Don't love the IOL option. So edge feels like the best mix of, addressing a need, but also going best player available. So let's go Drake Jackson here at 46. And then on to pick number 47. I am going to go linebacker here. And Brian Asamoah is a pick that I love for Washington. It's a way of addressing a position without going, back to the first round well and, essentially giving up on Jamin Davis, it feels like. So Asamoah, these long arms, 93rd percentile on his wingspan. I think he'll have a huge impact in the passing game because of it. And also has that tackle radius, if you want to call it that, with those long arms. So maybe it's a couple years time Cole Holcomb replacement. Maybe it's a replacement for Jamie Davis. Time will tell that story, but trying to throw darts and address a position of need still. Now I do realize it's 2 picks for Washington on the defensive side for a team that still needs a wide receiver, could use some interior offensive line help. I get that. It's just the way the board is played out. And, as much as those are needs, you can't get overzealous, and they can get better in other areas as well. So I think Kyle Hamilton, Brian Asamoah are potential upgrade. Hamilton for sure. Asamoah, maybe not. But I think the process that's the right way of conducting, as opposed to, maybe reaching on someone like a let's go look at the wide receiver room for a good example. Jalen Tolbert I wouldn't hate here, but Alec Pierce maybe is a vertical threat. I don't love him here at 47, just as an example. Romeo Doubs another one. Plus you still have De'Ami Brown. So talking a long time here about the Commanders, but I really like Asamoah here, despite making a second consecutive defensive pick for a team that's already pretty good on the defensive side compared to their offense. Moving back to the Chicago Bears, this is actually where I have Jalen Tolbert. So again, I don't hate Tolbert in this range, but it feels like for Washington, if you're going to go contested catch guy, I'd like to have him be 6'3", 6'4", and maybe a little bit better of a route runner. So if it's London and 11, I like that. I'm here for that. And so maybe the route for Washington should be like London at 11, and then you go safety Jaquan Brisker, Lewis Sin at 47. And if that's the case, I think it's an awesome haul. Just not how I had it playing out here. But let's go Jalen Tolbert here at 48. Look at the Bears wide receiver room. It's not good. They just signed Byron Pringle. And also, I do want to throw out, this team does have other needs, but let's look at the interior offensive line class where we are right now. I don't think there's a clear-cut guy that's a massive upgrade. And even if you look at maybe a Luke Hideki, I could see him maybe in the second round. Zach Tom, we'll talk about him later. Jamari Salyer, maybe. This team could use, an edge rusher. So I wouldn't hate a Nick Benito, Josh Pascal, Kingsley and Nagbury. But, this team has just got to put some weapons and some resources around Justin Fields. I'd love to have it be offensive line, wide receiver. But sometimes teams do weird things. And why not go double up at wide receiver? And then you would look at this wide receiver room. So it's Christian Watson as your, call it the big body guy, the contested catch, wins down the field. Let's just put him into that, category. Darnell Mooney is a guy who wins from 10-plus yards down the field, pretty solid route runner, a lot of explosiveness, very shifty, lots of downfield burst. And then you have Jalen Tolbert as another contested catch guy. I just think it just kind of puts a well-rounded group together for Justin Fields. And part of it is just multiple darts at that position group. And if any of them don't work out, that's why you take 2 here. But again, part of it is also you play the process. The board is not kind to you right here if you need an interior offensive lineman. And because of that, let's go get Tolbert. Let's go get Christian Watson. And let's see what Justin Fields is going to be. And if he isn't the answer, well, you got some pretty decent options and some intriguing pieces for whoever the next quarterback might be. And if these wide receivers don't work out, well, at least you tried. And like you went through the process and you tried to put weapons around Justin Fields. And then you try to swing the bat later on in the process. So part of it, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, well, 2 wide receivers doesn't make the perfect situation. But, you look at what else is here, and I don't love what they might have. And I think this is a draft where you got to focus on the offense. You could go Lewis Sin here to pair up with Eddie Jackson. You could go edge rusher, but if you're not trying to get Justin Fields to hit his potential in year 2 and even more in year 3, then what are we doing? Like, it feels like you weren't hired to maximize Justin Fields, and at that point, I'm questioning the entire process to what this offseason was supposed to be for Chicago. So a little weird, a little uncharacteristic for what I've done with the Bears in the past. I'd love to go offensive line and wide receiver, but why not throw 2 darts at the board here and try to get a nice trio, a nice young trio, might I add, with Tolbert, Watson, with Darnell Mooney already there. For the New Orleans Saints, this is also one, Matt Corral might not even go in the second round. I don't know. There's just a lot of concerns about, RPO-heavy system at Ole Miss. The character concerns of something I'm hearing more and more about. But here for New Orleans, if Pete Carmichael is going to keep that, Sean Payton underneath system, I'd really be interested to see what Matt Corral looks like in that rhythm, West Coast-like offense. And it's just a potential Jameis Winston replacement. So that's also intriguing. Now, this team could go maybe get that third pass rusher that they're, Granted, they did take Peyton Turner last year, but, they seem to always prioritize defensive line. And maybe it's not necessarily an edge rusher. Maybe it's an interior rusher. Maybe it's a true nose tackle to go with David Onyemata. Maybe it's a linebacker. I think they could go defense here, but Corral would be an interesting fit for what that offense, traditionally has looked like. And plus, you already added in a wide receiver in this class, so the pieces are already there, and you've added in a tackle as well. So some of your bigger holes are already filled. So Corral here at 49 would be an interesting pairing. Back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Jalen Petrie, this is another one of those player team situations where I think it makes a lot of sense considering who they've lost. But, if you think of Jalen Petrie as your Tyrann Mathieu replacement, I think it makes a ton of sense, and I like it there. But L'Jarius Sneed has primarily played out of the nickel, so I'd be interested to see if they'd be comfortable moving him to the outside, where he has played better in the nickel than on the outside, but maybe, as time's gone on, he's just gotten better and he's ready to make that move outside. And also, you still have Juan Thornhill, I think, works best as a true free. You have Justin Reed there, who I think also kind of works as a true free, but it has some flexibility as a free and a strong. And all this to say, it may not be a perfect fit, but Petrie gives them options, right? And if you can move Sneed to the outside, he kind of fits what they have wanted in an outside corner. So I think that makes sense if he's comfortable doing that and it can make that leap. And then Petrie becomes this, nickel strong safety type that they had with Tyrann Mathieu. So this is a Kansas City team that's predominantly valued having three safety. That's why Dan Sorensen, even with Juan Thornhill and company there, has seen the field as often as he has. So teams like Tampa Bay, teams like Kansas City, they pride having three safeties on the field, and I think Petrie could be a way for Kansas City to do that, but also be Tyrann Mathieu replacement, also attacking a position in need in quarterback. But L'Jarius Sneed's a key cog in the mix here. Where do they value him? Obviously, I'm not in the building. I don't know all that information, but the way I've looked at it, Petrie, I think, makes a ton of sense, and maybe you move Sneed to the outside. 51, this is when I have Lewis Sin coming off the board. I mean, this is just a perfect, add to this. Anthony Harris is brought back on a one-year deal, but he is just not going to be a long-term starter, obviously. And even right now, I don't think he's all that good. So Sin might be an upgrade over Anthony Harris right now. They play a lot of too high. Sin has the ability to be an impact player in coverage, but also work downhill, play in the box, be a hard hitter. Kind of checks a lot of boxes there, and awesome value here at 51. Then at 52, I think John Mechie III is one that, once I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be a great ad for Pittsburgh. And, you look at the James Washington trade to Dallas, and this third wide receiver role has become one that's a pretty big need for Pittsburgh. As Deontay Johnson, I think, can be a wide receiver one. I think Chase Claypool can be a starting wide receiver. But then, who's that three? Mechie, I think, can live in the slot. Nice complement to those other two guys. And it's obviously a huge area of need. And plus, in this situation, we went quarterback in round one. Go get a wide receiver in round two and try to build that ecosystem around Willis and, in his interim starter and Trubisky in this situation we've laid out. And then for the Green Bay Packers, I've even seen this pick in the first round, so I really like it as a potential second-round pick. But Logan Hall as that 3-tech playing next to a guy like Kenny Clark makes a ton of sense. And, now you're getting some interior pressure. And this is a team that has prioritized having a number of edge rushers in the building, and we'll get back to that a little later on. Actually, we won't in this mock, but I've had other mocks where I've had edge rushers going, but maybe it's Logan Hall getting that interior pressure next to Kenny Clark, and then you already have Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary as the outside edge rusher. So don't hate that pick whatsoever, and even at 59, I'm going to go in a different direction, but that could be edge rusher / IDL as well. But if Hall's the pick here at 53, edge at 59 could certainly be in play all the same. And then for the New England Patriots, kind of alluded to it earlier, let's go with Leo Chenal here. I think he's a perfect scheme fit, and you look at what Bill Belichick's wanted, a linebacker, ability to blitz up the middle. Chenal, perfect add to that defense, and this is kind of where the way that cost analysis, right? You look at Devin Lloyd at 21, and it's like, okay, yeah, that'd be a good add. But then, what's the cornerback position look like at 54? Well, on this board, Kyler Gordon, okay. Roger McCreary, maybe, if you're not worried about the arm length, okay. Tariq Woolen, if you're up for a project, okay, maybe. Or you could go corner Andrew Booth at 21 and then get Leo Chenal at 54, and it feels like a really solid scheme fit and a really solid value there as well. So I think that's going to be the tough part for linebackers in this draft class is there's so many day two options that are really, really good that some of those day one caliber guys are going to fall a little bit and potentially become part of the day two crop. So Chenal here at 54, a really good add and address another position in need, and I think it maximizes what New England can do with this draft, right? You go corner round one, linebacker round two, still need to plug away at wide receiver. Could use an offensive lineman after losing Shaq Mason in a trade to Tampa. But the two biggest areas of need in my eyes are addressed here in the first two rounds. For the Arizona Cardinals here at 55, we talked about, Zion Johnson might be the person they're eyeing at 23, but in the situation he was taken off the board at 22, so they ended up going George Karlaftis. So here, let's go get them that interior offensive lineman. Dylan Parham could be a plug-and-play left guard, but also that Rodney Hudson replacement in the event of an injury, but also, a couple of years' time where Hudson might be retired. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense. For the same reason they might covet Zion Johnson, I think they would covet Dylan Parham here at 55. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. Let's go Josh Pascal here. So we went, Tyler Smith, this, tackle or guard tackle combo. We're going to play him at guard to start, move him out to tackle, and Tyler Smith retires in this situation. Josh Pascal, I think it's just a upgrade over Dante Fowler. Maybe not right away. Give him a couple of weeks, but as someone who could be the edge rusher opposite of DeMarcus Lawrence and allows you to keep Micah Parsons in this rover role, essentially, where he could be an off-ball linebacker, but he can also just tee off and blitz against, guards who typically aren't as good at pass protectors as tackles. So gives you that flexibility that Dan Quinn was, really taking advantage of down the stretch at the end of last season. So let's add Pascal, and he's a guy who's starting to get hot at the right time and become a really trendy round 2 pick. At 57, I talked about Breece Hall being a really interesting pick in the first round for the Bills. Well, he's still on the board here, 57, so I'm not going to overthink this. This is another player. So you add Treylon Burks, you add Breece Hall, you're just garnering more and more firepower on the offensive side, but there are also two guys who can take hits away from Josh Allen, which is what I spent a lot of time talking about in the first round. You don't want those hits racking up on your franchise quarterback who you're paying a lot of money to. You want to see him on the field. So goal-to-goal spots, third and short, fourth and shorts, let's get the ball in the hand of Breece Hall, or let's work the ball into the hands of a yak machine, potentially, with Treylon Burks. So I think it makes a lot of sense there. And value here at 57 is a lot better in my eyes compared to taking him at 25. Here at 58, I'm going to go Nick Benito, and there's some size concerns here, but even if he's a pass rush only, again, the NFL is becoming passing heavy to where, a DPR, quote unquote, still is probably on the field 60% of the time, just because, you're going to pass the ball about 60, 70% of the time, more often than not. So Benito makes a ton of sense there. So even if he's a designated pass rusher and he is undersized, and you can't keep him out there on running downs, he's still going to see the field more than half the time. And this is a Falcons team that just needs impact players, people who can come out there and put the quarterback on the ground. And Benito showcased, a lot of that at Oklahoma, one of the highest win rates in pass rush situations. So just a proven player, and I think Dean Pease could have a whole lot of fun. And Benito had a ton of success at Oklahoma on these stunts and switches. So Benito and Dean Pease defense, where he's going to be creative how he schemes up pressure, could be a nice pairing there for those two. And then for the Green Bay Packers, talked about edge certainly could be in play here, but I'm actually going to go Trey McBride. Just a a new age version of basically Robert Tonyan, and not asking Aaron Rodgers to create a career for a tight end who basically hasn't had one. Trey McBride feels like a perfect guy for what they covet at that position. Enough athletic ability, enough blocking ability, checks those boxes, and definitely a position in need. And after you losing Devontae Adams, there's not going to be one player who makes all that up. So we took George Pickens in the first round. Let's go ahead and get an upgrade at tight end too, so we can kind of share the wealth, if you will, and get the pass-catching core better across the board as opposed to just trying to have one player be Devontae Adams. So I think from that idea and that process, it makes a lot of sense. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we went Devontae White in the first round. Let's go Jaquan Brisker. This feels like a team that, when you look at their depth chart, safety might not be an area of need, especially, they bring in, Logan Ryan, but he's this nickel corner, strong safety, box safety type. They sign a Keanu Neal. He's going to be back to safety, but he's also, strong safety, hard hitter type of safety. It feels like they lack a true free and a true deep coverage guy. And Jaquan Brisker, if you look at his, snap alignment, more often than not in the box, but such a stellar athlete and can move so well and was good in coverage. I think there might be a role there for him. And Antoine Winfield Jr. as well can be a free safety, but I think they would prioritize him being a robber of sorts. And if you're in that cover three old way of looking at it, where he's at the sticks, he's in the box making plays, reading quarterback's eyes, and then Jaquan Brisker can be your traditional true free safety and deep safety guy. So just another guy in the mix here, and if he falls to 60, it's one of those things where Jaquan Brisker is a more than top 60 player in almost everybody's board. So why would you not jump all over this? So and plus, Logan Ryan's a 1-year deal, Keanu Neal is a 1-year deal. Those two players are not long-term fixtures on the roster. So Brisker paired up with Antoine Winfield Jr. And again, another team that prioritizes having three safeties. So again, it makes a ton of sense across a number of different layers. For San Francisco, I'm going to have this be the team that ends the slide for Kyler Gordon. Not quite as great an athlete as maybe he was hyped up to be, and the size wasn't as, stellar as maybe it was hyped up to be as well. But zone-heavy defense there for D'Amico Ryans in San Francisco, a position in need. It feels like he would be a really solid add and good value here at 61 as a guy who was at one point getting first-round hype. So pair him up with Charvarius Ward and Stanford corner that they took, Ambry Thomas in last year's draft. So maybe cornerback isn't the most pressing needs. Maybe they'd rather go Cam Jurgens here, interior offensive lineman here. I'll showcase that now. Maybe Jurgens or maybe a Cole Strange is the pick here at 61. I think they might be able to get one of those two guys in the third. Let's go ahead and add Kyler Gordon. You can never have too many assets there on the outside, on the defensive side, or even on the offensive side, but you never have too many corners is all I'm trying to say. On to 62, let's go Kingsley Enagbare. I talked about it when we went Arnold Ebiketie in the first round. This team can do better than Frank Clark. I don't know. I'm kind of questioning why they kept him around. Are going to pay him anything, but ideally, Ebiketie, is one starter, and then Enagbare is your other, and you can move on from Frank Clark maybe next offseason. So I would not be afraid to take the swing of the bat here. But also, you look at the corner position, maybe Roger McCreary, but we've already kind of looked at that position with Jalen Petrie here at 50. So maybe tackle because Orlando Brown's playing on the franchise tag. Maybe double up a wide receiver. I don't know. Feel like edge was the best, again, mix of best player available but position of need and something that will add value long term. So I like an Enagbare here at 62. And then our final two picks we talked about. McCreary. There's a couple different ways that you could look at this for Cincinnati. We already added an interior offensive lineman. Maybe linebacker is interesting. Maybe a fourth wide receiver. Maybe a tight end to replace C.J. Uzomah. Sure, I think it's worth taking a swing of the bat here from McCreary. Someone who, despite his size, had a ton of success breaking up passes. Now he also got picked on a little bit in the SEC, so a little bit of a give and take there. But maybe in a couple years' time he's a Mike Hilton replacement, or maybe it turns out the arm length isn't a problem. He's an outside starter, and Eli Apple was somebody they brought back late in free agency, so maybe he's a replacement for Apple in a year's time. So, again, time will tell this story, but this team's biggest needs are interior offensive line still and cornerback. And with two picks, we have addressed both those spots by putting players that could be starters. I feel really good about Kenyon Green in the first. Roger McCreary, we'll see. Time will tell, but you're taking a shot, and you're trying to find a Eli Apple replacement or a long-term Mike Hilton replacement as he gets older and older. So it's worth taking a swing here. I also don't hate Troy Anderson here. I don't think linebacker is a huge area of need, but he's just such an athletic freak. I'd love to see considering how well they did with Logan Wilson, what does Troy Anderson become in that defense for Lou Amoretta? But final pick in round number 2, I'm going to go Zach Tom here, somebody I haven't talked about, and I do want to hit on. The Senior Bowl, they had him playing at guard, and, Mike Renner put together the draft guide for Pro Football Focus, kind of hit on it in that write-up. Here, I'll put it back on your screen now. But because of the play strength, maybe some people see him as guard. But considering Billy Turner's on a 1-year deal, I look at him as a tackle, and specifically, if play strength is your biggest concern, it's really easy to say, okay, play strength, not great. Look at Dylan Radunz, case in point. Maybe not the strongest guy. He could play tackle, but it's going to be on the right side. I think Zach Tom could be something similar, and it's a 1-year deal for Billy Turner. Zach Tom could be your potential replacement there for the future. So as they start grading my draft, here's another look at the first round. We'll get this off your screen, but hopefully you all enjoyed today's mock draft. Again, sorry for the hiatus and no face cam. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video, though, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, there's going to be a lot more NFL coverage around the corner, so be sure to hit that big red subscribe button and see what we have coming your way. Really excited to bring forward the content I have kind of pictured in my mind, but of course, this is all, catalyst for a conversation. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Who do I have going too high? Who do I have going too low? What picks do you think I'm completely off on? Where am I wrong? Where am I right? Love to have your thoughts down below in the comments section. But that's going to do it for today's video. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I am signing off.